and you just did that while it was playing.
And we're live. Yeah, it's up and running now, Neil.
I know. And you just spoke on top of it again. You'll hear it come up. Telling me I can hear it and they can hear it. But that's fine.
Endlessly entertaining.
Yes, this works great. All right, so.
Honestly, I thought I had 20 seconds.
No, you didn't. I said, don't talk for 20 seconds. So anyway, guys, how are you all doing? It's good that we finally worked the bugs out. I'm glad that we're finally seeing that this is actually happening. I can actually see that it's playing.
Finally be internet famous, YouTube famous anyway, huh?
YouTube famous, exactly.
And as you can tell, we're still working the bugs out.
Yes, that's quite good. Well, it's bad because you guys can't really hear when it comes on. So, and I understand that. So we can't really do that. So anyway, look. So today we have, let's see here. So we got Chris Kelly. We have Richard, of course. We have Sean. We have Jim. And we have Mike. I'm glad that you guys are here. It is I guess it's a Labor Day weekend. I've been inside a lot. I tried to catch the Northern Lights last night. I stayed up all night, and they said, "Oh, you have a 4% chance of seeing them now," but the sun just came up. So, oh well, it was nice attempt anyway. Maybe we'll have some tonight. Was it just a big geostorm, was it? Did anyone know? Or I didn't actually figure out the cause.
I just saw the post in the Skype this morning that the aurora had come down almost south to Toronto. So I didn't notice. If I would have known that it was happening last night, I would have jumped up on the roof and had a look, see if I could see.
Well, it wasn't... No, I checked yours. It wasn't close enough to see it, but people in, I think, Alberta and stuff would have saw it, Quebec City.
Well, I'm a superintendent, so I can stand up on top of a 4-story building.
Well, there you go.
No, I know. It would have still been too far away for me to see.
So, yes, let's see if we can get this to work, my friends, now that we've done all the introductions. As everyone can probably read down below what we're going to be talking about right now. But just in case, I have it all lined up. So see if I can do this correctly. I'm going to see if we can merge this seamlessly into this. This is the new, trying something new every time. It's a whole brand new thing. So let me see if this works. So this should be the thing that actually says what's going on with that little cool guitar that plays. So let's see if it happens and does the whole thing here. All right. Give this a shot. No one talk for now. No one talk for like 40 friggin' seconds. Let me talk next. Okay, let's see if this works. All right. Welcome to the September 1st edition of the Electric View. I'm Neil Thompson. Today we'll be discussing the new observations from the ancient high-tech crowd from the point of view of the ancient electric sky crackling with energy. We have several sites around the world that seem to indicate that they made use of this energy in their work. Were the truly ancient origins of the sciences from a culture that had it all and lost it in a hellfire from the skies? Please take a moment to like, subscribe, donate, or however you wish to self-identify. All right, well. That worked out pretty well, I think. I'm pretty happy with the whole thing. So let's give this a shot, guys. I'm just very excited. This whole thing has just got me all tingly.
Pump you up.
Well, no, look at it. It just faded nicely. Everything worked out great. I can't ask for anything more on that one. It's amazing what happens when you learn about all the tools at your disposal. I've been learning this one tool at a time. What does this do? Oh, nothing blew up? Okay, what does this do? It's like pressing buttons on the Enterprise, and hopefully I don't beam myself out into space. So,
Scotty, beam me back.
You can't speak in space. How's that going to work? He'll just go, bleep. Hello?
I believe there's an emergency transponder button on your
okay, yeah. Yeah. That worked for all the red shirts, didn't it? So,
you're more like a Willy Wonka glass elevator guy to me.
Me or him?
Yeah, I could see you in a glass elevator just like shooting through the sky. Good thing.
Well, I don't think I'm there yet, but this is the reason I wanted to do this. God, I still miss Gene Wilder. Okay, so me too. So the thing I was noticing here, this is the part of I was watching Brian Forster the other day, and I saw this one that he did on the cataclysmic damage in Luxor. Well, and it was other places as well, but he was just showing it. Now, I'm not sure if you can see what's on the screen here, so. But he's gone through, and basically he's showing that this looks like the Egyptians that occupied the area, the people we call Egyptians, he's surmising that they obviously did not build this. They piled some of it up again, put their names on some of it, but it wasn't really their work, obviously. And getting a sense of scale is some of these artifacts, if you can see what I'm looking at on the screen here. But
well, the scale is phenomenal. In fact, it's just so mind-boggling to this gravitational force that we enjoy now, as opposed to possibly lessened gravitational, where we could move a bigger stone, and if we were bigger ourselves, it would be less difficult to move larger stones.
Well, that would be an ideal answer, but really the part that I'm really interested in is the damage that he points out. He was on that long, smooth one, like not this particular one. He was obviously pointing out the cracks and damage in this one, which is significant, as you can see. But some of them, he can see significant heat damage, like this, where it could flake off, and it's like it's been cooked on one side, just one side.
Yeah, that happens in construction when we're heating a concrete face. It spalls off the concrete. Same thing happened with these statues. The heat involved spalled the stone away from the surface and left this surface.
Well, and some of them look pretty bad, like they were, and hit from one side.
You're talking about the stones, megalithic stones found in China. Those were heated from the inside.
No. I'm referring to only the ones I'm seeing on the screen now.
Okay. Well, recently there was melting found in an ancient site.
I did not know this.
I believe in China, and I don't know where, but the melting happened from the inside, like from the top down, and they were able to prove that it wasn't a bottom-up kind of a deal, that it looked like it had been hit by a huge lightning bolt, and the stone itself melted from the inside. There you go, right there.
Oh, really? Like I never, although this looks amazing too. You can see, like, this is the type of thing that you would get if you had explosive damage coming down one side of it, because you can only carry so much current down these rocks.
Well, it's on actually both sides, or all sides of that stele.
That particular one? Because, well, this one doesn't look like it's that bad, yeah. But, never know.
Well, above it, I mean, I looked at that stele at the beginning of that image, and you could see it was a more full shot, and you could see damage all the way around it, like this one here. This has been all fixed. Okay,
you're watching the one that you're actually watching the live stream version. You're not watching me broadcast it to you.
No,
Okay.
I'm watching the Skype call. Two
Right,
guys are
right.
walking through right now, so.
But if the people who are now hearing it will hear you talk about it seconds after you've actually spoke about it, you see.
Right.
So you have to watch my version that's sending to you. Yes, this is time travel in the most subtle ways.
Well, I am watching, and I did.
But it's delayed.
But I mentioned if you went back.
But I won't. I can't go back because I can't go back in time.
Okay, never mind.
I don't have a TARDIS. But that's okay. Actually, I do.
I can only save time in a bottle.
There you go. But still, I'm glad that you're paying attention to the stuff that's on that screen. But just remember, for the people at home, that where you're actually looking at. But anyway, so what I'm seeing though is, we're looking at the damage that you can see on some of these walls. But still, the end result is the same. Some of it looks cooked, some of it looks like it was blasted. And in deference to Andy, some of it looks like it was hit by shockwaves. And now you said that some of them were hit and melted from the inside. And I think about Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World there when he was doing the whole vitrified forts and they were trying to see how they could burn this rock from the inside, because they knew it was melted to glass on the inside of these rocks. Right now, right up on the screen is the Colossi at Memnon. So this is the part where they were. I mean, these things are horribly damaged. And what are they? 1,300 tons? Something like that. I don't know. 1,500. But they look like they have been like some of it looks like it was cooked. I think anyway. I mean, it's discolored, if nothing else. I hope you guys agree. Or did I lose you all?
No, we're here, bro.
Okay. I don't know. No one's answering me suddenly.
I'm typing in the live stream at the moment, and I can't do two things at once, like walk and chew bubble gum. It's hard.
Okay.
Like words.
There in the back, you can see it's like blackened. Anyway, you were saying, Sean. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know if many people have ever noticed this. There was a guy that did a video several years ago about something I'm going to mention. The Temple of Luxor. When you look at the walls of the time of Alexander, his name and his picture, if you will, as a pharaoh, was chiseled into the stone itself. But what they would say would be 1,000 years before that, the pharaohs, it was an impression. It was raised off of the stone, as if the stone was wet, and they put a mold, if you will, over top of it, so that everything was raised off of the stone, which is really, really intriguing. I mean, the guy was in the temple and he actually showed it.
It was what? I'm looking at it right now. I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's in the Temple of Luxor. Alexander's name is chiseled into one of the walls, and his glyph is a pharaoh. But prior to that, we'll say 1,000 years according to standard chronology, the Egyptian pharaohs, it was raised off of the stone instead of being chiseled into it, as if the stone itself was wet. If that makes sense. You guys understanding it? I have to pull the video because I know he still has the video on YouTube. And that was something that I was like, whoa, was this material wet? Because the glyphs, if you will, are raised off of the stone rather than chiseled into it. Now, the chiseling was done very precise. Alexander's name and everything, it isn't like it was done sloppy at all. But it was.
Now you've compelled me to go find it myself. I'm very.
Yeah. Now I can see. I didn't go anywhere yet. I'm at home. I'm gonna see if I can find his video and where he shows it. And I'm like, that's really weird. And it's only they're only a couple feet away from each other where Alexander's name is versus forget what pharaoh it was. And it's completely different artwork.
And when you said raised out, you mean embossed, really, right?
Embossed, yeah, where it's actually raised up. See, okay, that might be where you're showing now what I'm talking about. How it's
The
raised
first one.
off of the, yeah, where it's raised off of. You have to pay, detail. It's raised off of the stone rather than carved into the stone. That is really interesting if you just really look closely. That even looks to be raised off of the stone rather than being carved into it. I don't know if he'll show it because I've never seen that video before. But I can see if I can find the guy's video, and he showed it, and I'm like, well, that's really interesting, you know?
So just to think that Alexander was right beside this just blows my mind, really.
Yeah, like his stuff's only a couple feet away from the pharaohs, or we'll just say of the New Kingdom, and still his stuff is carved into the stone rather than being, I'm going to say, embossed or raised off the stone. That was really intriguing to me. Like, you know.
Like who are the people that had this kind of technology? Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, it's not impossible. I mean, we've seen it done before. I mean, clearly, but
you go right across.
The people of Göbekli Tepe. Sorry, Sean. People of Göbekli Tepe that built Göbekli Tepe did that work. They took a stone and they carved into it and they chiseled away and leaving embossed images instead of carving into it like they did it in Alexander's day.
Well, actually, they would have to have done it.
It's still the tolerances. It's still done very, very concise, where it's there's no imperfections, if you will. Alexander, but still, that's just intriguing. Alexander's carved in where everything else is raised off. The first thing that jumped in my head was this stuff wet? They just put like a cylinder seal, like when they use a cylinder seal in Mesopotamia, and how they just roll the copper roll.
Well, that's why we're here. Clay. That's one of the things that did pop into my mind. What is going on with the like the idea of moldable stone or like there's a structure itself. I'm not sure. It's somewhere in Peru, I think, and it appears to be like it was cut with a wire and sort of expanded slightly after it was cooled, like that type of thing, like it was baking bread almost. And not really, of course, but the look of it, like it was the way that it wasn't lining up perfectly after it had sat for a bit. These type of things I find mystifying only because, it belies a whole different technology that is simply not something we're not capable of doing. It's not even like pouring concrete. It's not pouring a mold. It would be like silly putty with rocks,
Imparting a certain frequency or energy into the stone and changing its properties and making it soft, not hot.
I wish it was that simple. But hot would leave marks. We've seen the damage that heat does. So I'm not sure what's going there, but don't worry about that. I'm just going over to another video here.
Sean, you had a thought. Did you want to finish it?
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to dig this video out because it's done probably 4 years ago, and this guy has a whole lot of videos. His name is Brother Polite, kind of an Afrocentric, if you will, lecturer. But nonetheless, that was something that I was just like, wow, I have to find it. That was interesting. It kind of makes you think anyway of how they did it. Because either way, they would have to chisel around block, and it would just have to be as concise as it is, rather than being rolled like a cylinder seal. I would think would be a little bit, I'm not gonna say easier, but would make more sense. Nonetheless, Alexander's stuff was done really good, but it was carved into it. Like, interesting,
Well, like this wall that you see on the screen here, this is this to me is one of those weird things where I'm like, doesn't this look like almost like it's too much? Like they didn't, the people who designed it didn't design it to be written all over. It looks more like for
Built
example,
in by successive generations.
well, imagine that, you went over to, one of those giant, like a giant dam or something today, and you go over and you're sitting there, it's 1,000 years from now, and you see this giant structure, and now you and your ancestors are carving into the thing and putting graffiti on it because it's really impressive.
I was just going to equate it to graffiti, go into the inner cities and tags on top of tags and tags beside tags.
Well, and then you can see here that looks like they took part of it, like the stuff was done at the top, like those little frills at the top and other things like that. But then the wall is inset again below it. That looks like to me that they basically chiseled off what was ever there and put a whole new mural on it. Like this is
tags on top of other tags, erasing them basically.
Yeah, like this is. I mean, that's what that looks like to me. I don't know if that's true, but this is what I'm seeing, and it looks like they were pretty diligent. And I mean, it's not really. Well, and of course they painted these too, so yeah, it would be, the layers of spackle. David Turner says there, yeah.
Right.
Anyway, just very interesting stuff. Just taking a look here through some of the parts of the video.
Another enigma is they did not build on top of anything in Egypt. The foundations go into the ground, but that culture did not build on top of ruins at all. That is something that maybe a lot of people don't know about. That Mesopotamia they did, and other places they did. We know definitely in Istanbul they did, but they did not build on top of anything in Egypt. They built separately.
Well, we suspect that the shaft was there long before the pyramid was. That's a speculation that's pretty accepted.
Well, we got to really think. No, I was just thinking we should probably go beyond that, even like thinking, what was the world like? What I'm looking at is people who inhabited something long after it was of any practical use, and after a flood or something or some cataclysm, and then they move in the area. But I don't mean violently or anything. It could just be an occupying and then going and taking a look at what was underneath Pompeii, and then people come along and think that they made it because they're dumb, and they just go, yeah, I know, no, this is us, yeah. And this is kind of how I picture some of this stuff, and this is why I think that they, just like the ancient Chinese handed down information, as Ramon was going over the other day there, this culture handed down their own information, which became alchemy, or alchemy, or whatever, alchemy, whatever combination of words means that. Commission, kemet. So I mean, obviously Egypt, but not sure if L was supposed to be like EL, Saturn type of thing, because it would be like alchemy then would be the knowledge or ways of the people of Commission during the times of Saturn. Would be a translation.
Yeah, all I was saying was, whereas you go to Mesopotamia and they were excavating during the times of Flinders Petrie, they're like, oh wow, there was a building built on top of this old building. The Egyptians may have put the shafts underneath and built on top of the shafts, but they didn't build over top of existing buildings like you find in other regions, which is
South Americans do that big time.
It's its own enigma, whereas they didn't do that. Those books, those Charles Genathal books, outline all of that, and I was like, years ago, very interesting. I didn't know that. Where the foundations go deeper, but it's not like they were like, oh wow, there's a building underneath this building, not in Egypt. That's one of the enigmas of Egypt. Like they didn't do that. They just would build another building, if you will. You know, unlike anywhere else.
Maybe they couldn't. Sometimes, maybe some cultures probably might not even be able to move the relics. Also, some of them might not even have found them. I mean, no one even knew that there was a temple in front of the Sphinx. It's quite possible that the ancient Egyptians didn't even, who we consider to be ancient Egyptians, didn't even know it was there. Because there's no writing on it. Temple of Abydos. Right. It's just like a cistern. Like it almost looks like just like something like the foundations of a dock or something, you know, like it doesn't even look like this stuff. This has just been covered over with tags. Pharaoh Ramesses was here.
Exactly. The same thing with the pyramid. There's nothing that says this is the pyramid of Dozier. This is the pyramid we built in the name of this pharaoh. No, it's as if they went in and just put their names way up in a upper shaft, like I was here. That's there isn't anything on the pyramids that would definitely say, oh, this is what they were doing with the pyramids and X, Y, Z. Like, okay, it's there. I'm the new king. I'm gonna put my name on it and just that he's in a spray can. We're just gonna use what we have at the time.
Are you guys familiar with the giant glass slab that was found in Galilee?
What?
Yeah, huge, ginormous piece of glass.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I've seen pictures of it. It's more like a blob, but yeah,
no,
it's glass.
It's a block. It's giant and rectangular, not a blob at all. They actually had a huge feast on it and like used it as a table when they found it.
Well, someone go and grab a picture of it. Put it up there. I'll put it on here. Take a look at it.
Do that immediately.
Anyway, go on. You were saying?
Well, let me. I'm.
Can't do two things at once. Yeah.
I think someone else could do that. Yeah. No, it's I'll throw this up real quick.
Again, just as another nuance.
It's the slab of Beth Garim, I think is how it's said. It's located in Galilee. It's one of the most sacred places in ancient Jewish world. It's just right next to the catacombs. It's in a natural cave, and it was made into a cistern for storing water. It apparently was not used all the way up until the end of the 4th century, and it was discovered back in 1956.
Huh.
This might be. It's the website I'm reading here is from the Corning Museum of Glass.
Oh, you can drop the link right in the thing. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, I just do that.
Too late. I just dropped it.
Ha!
There we go. Okay, I'm looking at it. 6.5 by 11 feet, 18 inches thick, perfectly level. Okay.
So the technology to create this monolith, for lack of a better word, barely exists today.
So it's not. So this wasn't like some chunk of glass from space. No,
this is literally dated to 1600 years ago.
Wow.
So somebody knew some stuff. There was some ancient glass making techniques that were going on some time ago.
Well, and some impressive ones as well. This makes me question this whole idea that they couldn't have made the Dendera light bulb and stuff like that.
They had an understanding that we did not give them credit for. But this has been around for a long time. This is a very mainstream thing, and it's interesting that it's like when you start looking at the world through electric eyes, I guess, for lack of a better word, start to read stuff and see stuff differently, and it's just interesting to see this was obviously done with some sort of electrical energy, and there's no way to melt. How else would you melt glass like that?
Well,
you look at that.
We see all over
that
the moon,
corner,
right?
That bottom right corner of that. It looks like it's melted, and it doesn't look like actually glass. It looks more like stone.
Yeah, well, they didn't realize it was glass for a long time until it was tested, and it was then discovered that it was glass. That's why Corning got excited about it.
Oh, of course, because because they're weird.
Yeah.
Glass people are weird.
It says glass making in ancient times was often carried out in two stages. The first was an engineering stage, the hot, hard, dirty work of heating the granular raw materials to a temperature of about 1100 Celsius, around 2000 Fahrenheit, in order to bring about the chemical reactions that transformed them into a ferro melt. When the melt cooled down from this near white heat, it was set up into glass.
I can't even. That's very, very difficult to do, to heat that evenly up. But I mean, it's possible. But yeah, I mean, the idea, you'd have to use certain fuel. You'd have to keep it going for quite a bit of time. I mean, there's only so much energy in wood.
And corpses of our enemies.
And corpses of our enemies, exactly. We, I mean.
Yeah, just throw them on the pyre.
Yep. Baby needs a new pair of glass.
So yeah, it's amazing the stuff you dig up when you start looking around through Electric Universe perspective,
Well, I mean, one of the things that happened that I remember from a long time ago, there was this. I mentioned it before on the show. It was called Mysteries of the Unexplained, and it was a Reader's Digest book or something, like a coffee table book or whatever. But the thing that hit me is there was a description of something like it was a bell or a figurine, and it was basically what they were describing was aluminum. It was a silverish metal, blah 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 blah, lighter than iron, but but of course the problem is that this is in ancient times, and aluminum can't exist. We can't make aluminum out of ore like you can with iron. You have to use electricity to draw it out. And they use very large vats that are basically giant reverse batteries, so to speak, and they pull the aluminum out of the ore by basically letting it float to the top, but keeping it electrified, and then pulling it to one of the anodes or something like that. So it's basically an electric blast furnace, but it's not something you can do with electricity. And when I saw that, it struck me as, what a mystery. Wow. And now it's like, yeah, they had electricity. Just because it seems so obvious that they had, maybe not the way that we would describe electricity. They were aware of this thing, if they understood the true nature of it, could harness it all the time. Individuals would the power that a human being has multiplied when he has a tractor or when he has livestock. It's significant because you can use them to do work. But I think at least if nothing else, they had stuff on an industrial scale. Those who had power impressed people with their, everyone's like the Stargate Gould. No, I make flashy light shows all over the place. Because unfortunately, if it was just like it was in the movie, though, it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting, because they would go and they would shine their lights in the Dendera light bulb and stuff, and they would try to spook Jack O'Neill and Daniel Jackson, and they would just start shooting them with MP4s, and that would be the end of that. So, because you're impressing people who thought fire's cool. You're not impressing. We're trying to look back on it with that point of view. What we're impressed is with this level of technology. This is supposed to be a pyramid, apparently, what they're in there now. This is supposed to be that pyramid that's all gutted from the inside or exploded. It's stuff like that kind of blows my mind. But what did they do? What was going on inside this thing that you could blow it up? And this is the idea. There's more than one pyramid that looks like that has been exploded. I find that I find that compelling that they were perhaps maybe using them because they seem to make a use of the idea of capacitance in some way, like perhaps maybe a buffer, like the ideas we talked about with dolmens, where they might be lightning attractors.
Well, people can I interrupt for 1 second, Neil?
I'm ranting, so yes.
Yes, okay. People have to understand that we think that the electrical potential was a lot greater in the ancient past. And this is how they were able to tap the electrical force from nature itself and direct it where they wanted it to go and what they wanted it to do.
Oh, yeah. And the idea, of course, being were they using it to, some people have said, oh, they use it to make the land better or something, to make it healthier. Seen that argument before. I've seen the argument that they were generating power with it. That's possible, quite likely. I've seen the Giza power plant theories. Looking at it though, and seeing what they were doing, after I saw that Russian who was describing what they might be doing with inside that cow chambers, the bowls where they were, making pressure chambers inside the sarcophagus at the I can't even, not even sure what it's called. Serapeum, thank you. And yeah, so they were, if that's what they were doing there, basically letting decaying material and bacteria make high pressures, creating a positive negative on this, inside this stone, because it's granite, it's piezoelectric, and the granite hallways of the Great Pyramid, were they doing something like that? Were they making a electrical device, positive core? I mean, it is called fire in the middle, pyramid. Is there a connection there? Is there a reason why maybe they were making such positive pressures that they were trying to use, they used a literal mountain of rock to hold it down? That could be the case. And these things could eventually fail, like that something was so powerful that the forces that I was describing in my little video there, but what could be used could blow those casing stones right off of it.
Well,
these are things I'm thinking about. But
we know that the thunderbolts of the gods had held amazing amounts of energy, and if they had built a pyramid that was tapping into that energy, that would be like an electrical leader in a lightning storm to this thunderbolts, these thunderbolts of the gods, and they would just come down, and I could see it blowing a pyramid up. It would have power.
Obviously, there would be significant things going on, but I picture you have a like it could be attracting hits from the area. It could be attracting energy from the area so that it doesn't hit the surrounding countryside. It doesn't kill people.
Right, and there are some steps inside a temple in Egypt that you can see that the floor has been melted.
Really?
Yes, sir. Brian Forrester on one of his videos shows this melting of the floor and melting of the wall down near the bottom of the floor, that it's definitely blackened and it's melted, and nobody kind of like what we were just seeing a few seconds ago.
I saw some damaged walls. I was going to mention it, but I didn't want to say anything.
Let me see if I can find an image of that.
Well, yeah. It's that kind of stuff that I'm finding very interesting. I like the pits here. The pits are very distinctive. We see this a lot in canyons, just little craters, basically. Just tons of them just going, because there must have been some sort of friggin' wind going through here, like electric wind, just ripping pits out of the place.
Oh, look at that. It came right up, right away.
It did it? Okay, well,
yes,
let's link it on over. I'll grab it. Ultimately Christmas trees. Yes, Kronos, I'm very big fan of that idea. especially when you have the garland going around the circles and then you put little lights on it to indicate the little plasmoids going up towards heaven. I keep on wondering whether or not the ancient Egyptians were thinking that, like, or everyone on Earth, the idea of a soul, excuse me, the idea of a soul, if there was even, you know, I mean, I'm not trying to judge religiously, but I mean, if you were there and someone had passed on and you were mourning them and you had a child there and you suddenly saw a light float up the stairway to heaven, so to speak, up the Christmas tree towards the star at the top, would you not go, oh, there he goes, there it is, right there? You know, and you would, you know, a kid would never know the difference, and you really don't know how far away that is anyway. You would never know it's, you know, things like that come into my mind. But all right, so Secret Passage is Cheops, that's the one? Or no, wait. It's this one here, Declosed TV, Ancient Nuclear War, Melted Stone. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I have another image here of another portion of it.
Oh, the melted, these steps here. I've seen those steps before. I wondered. I just thought they were really worn down. I've seen them go up that step just a while ago. Yeah.
I'm surmising that one of those electrical snakes came down and just zapped the hell out of that floor looking for electrons.
Huh. Well, it wouldn't surprise me that they would. I mean, if there was a cataclysm that turned the entire air to fire, you know, type of thing. This is another thing. I always wondered why there was really, like, some bunkers I've seen had, like, bunker-like structures I've seen have very small openings. And some people go, oh, that was for predators or something. And I was wondering, maybe it's not. Maybe it's the type of thing where you go in and you, like, the fire outside really can't get through such a small hole. Get my meaning? Or when it does, you can just stay away from the hole, you know? I think about that, because that's some... Yeah, the damage of it does look significant, and it does look like it has that sort of cracked layer look like you get when you heat rock.
Well, you can see the layer above melted and slumped down into the next layer.
It does appear to be so, yes.
And then re-solidified.
Either that or they didn't finish the stairs, or somehow water is magic. But that would imply that the really heavy basalt stone actually did that, which I don't think so, but I get what you mean. So.
Well,
very interesting.
If they didn't finish the stairs, that wouldn't, I mean, the slumping goes below the edge of the corner of the stair up against the wall. You can see it slump below that. The stairs had already been finished, in my view.
No, I think you're right. I'm just looking at it before I saw. It was quite clear that the level of the stair was raised up in the middle, indicating, as you said, that some of it had sort of slumped and poured. Perhaps more than one stair layer had sort of flowed down the stairs like it was goo. I'm not sure what they're looking at there.
Molten rock.
Yeah, but look at how smooth, how fine, like.
Well, it's also being etched away in this electrical.
No. But
thing, right?
Do you see the detail of this carving here that's on the screen here? See these little. Like, look at that. It's not that's a stone wall. And it has these little grooves in it. They almost look, well, no, some of them are thicker than others. I thought it was machined, but maybe not. Maybe they're just really straight, which again doesn't really make sense, but I'm not going to argue with them right here. So. But I mean, some of these things, like especially where they're at, like in Petra there, some of these places look like they were made to survive, well, hell, I guess. I mean, they're bunkers. Some of them look like it. I mean, look at these things.
You mean the thunderbolts of the gods, aka fire from the sky?
Well, this is what we're talking about today. What they were building for. They're in a deep valley. The land is way up there, and they have these crevices everywhere down by the ground, where the earth would not be on fire. They weren't worried about water or drowning. They seemed to be much more concerned about things that were coming from above. That's just my interpretation of what I'm seeing here. But there's some melted stairs over there in the corner again.
Well, putting it in a canyon, in a close canyon like that, they possibly understood how these forces work, that they would have to etch their way down the canyon to get to the bottom, right?
Well, how often do you have thunderstorms today? And imagine that the thunderstorms are at least 10 times worse than they are today. Like a thunderstorm's a thing you hide from. Like maybe that's why we're scared of them as children and everything else.
Yeah, yeah.
Like as a sort of a natural cats don't like snakes, so cucumbers scare them type thing.
Or whenever a really, really loud bang happens close to you, you tend to jump.
Well, that's okay, fair. I'm not going to say that, but there's a little bit more of an intrinsic fear of lightning, is what I meant. But like we're not scared of thunder
Well, I'm just
today.
saying that they're related. With lightning comes big sound, so.
But yeah, if you were trying to hide from these things, would this not be a wise place to have at least a bunker sort of laid out for you? You know, like, you know what I mean? And look at some of the stuff blackened right on the top. Like, I mean, look at that. It looks like Mars practically.
Melted, yeah.
That's in Peru.
Well, it says Petra there.
Okay, my bad. I just posted something about Peru where they literally have a bunker, and I think I referenced it as China before, so I want to correct that and say that
there is bunkers down in China too. It looks like.
Yeah, there are, but the one that I was referring to specifically with the melted rock was Peru. I just posted a mystery history video about it, so it's very much in keeping with what you're talking about right now.
Well, that's ideal. This is the type of stuff that I'm very, very interested in, because their concerns were different. I don't think I mean, after massive death, their concerns were. I mean, some of these people clearly were concerned about things from the sky. I've seen some of these things. So basically, there was two types of structures: people that were taking advantage of it, and people that seemed to be hiding from it. Both are equally acceptable things to do, by the way. I'm not arguing. I remember hearing stories about when we first found out that these things were linked together by little pieces of metal. I mean, I said to Andy, these things are electrically solid, like they're one continuous piece, and he came up with the idea that they were actually Faraday cages, and I thought that was a brilliant idea, something that I wasn't expecting. So here's a very big door. So I wonder what this was more for. But look, yeah, holy crap, look at the burning. I mean, I think that's what I'm seeing.
Well, those could be years of fires too.
Yeah, I suppose.
Soot.
These guys knew how to hang out, though. And in a desert, those big boys there are like, yep. I can drink water in here. I'm good, he says.
Coming on, Peru. Coming, Uncle Owen.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's not soot. That looks a little more intense than just soot.
Maybe they had to reform it because it got broken. And then, of course, they just made it even. because obviously over time these things got less and less intense. There were certain events like the Day of the Dead and other things like that that were more intense.
Look at the stratification.
Oh, yes.
Sorry, keep going.
Well, also I like the curves in the side, those sort of like tube marks in the side. We saw the same thing that when we were in many canyons, like when we were in West Forks and other things. They have very large C-shaped cuts in the side walls, like where, and they were usually just above when it was sort of going to metallic or iron-bearing rock, and which made me sort of suspect that this was an induced field, like a ring current, sort of like a fire snake, basically going along the ground, but going just above where current's coming out at, creating sort of like an eddy, one of those tubes you see on around the squatter man. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Not penetrating into the ground, but
running along it.
Of course, running along the ground, searching for a source of electrons.
Well, it's actually just an induced current.
It is.
So that's my thoughts. Like, I wish I just had it there on the screen a little bit ago, but they were.
I see. Okay.
But they were definitely and a lot of people use these as shelter. Like when I was in certain canyons in the United States, you could see that they would put up stones in front of it to basically make a house out of it. So you had shelter from the elements. It can't rain there. You have a large, deep C-shaped cut, and everyone lives inside there. And of course, they were just above a river down below in a canyon. So I thought it was like, oh, this is an ideal little spot. You got shade, you can move around. You got wind whipping through the place to keep you cool. Oh yeah, I could see why they were hanging out there. Some of these structures, like this is Machu Picchu and places like that. And these angular pieces remind me of the same stuff they see in Japan. That almost look like they were modular blocks meant to fit together or something. Like we're looking at the remains of some giant baby's electro set or something, like Lego set.
Well, there's a giant one of those off the coast of Japan.
The Yonaguni Monument, yeah.
Assuming... Well, no, a giant piece of stone that's been cut into like that with different angles and different terraces, and it's pretty massive.
The Yonaguni Monument, yes.
Oh, sorry. I didn't understand what you said. My bad.
That's okay. No, it's exactly what I might be saying it wrong, actually. I don't know. But it is, I remember that. But it reminds me, you're right, it kind of reminds me of this, although I don't see the fitting. I see it could have been like it might remind me of what maybe, like quarry, but maybe not. This is obviously something like these are wonderful, the way that they fit together and the way that they've managed to survive such a massive strike. You can even see how they almost look like they're bent, like they've been hit.
Well, yeah.
They've been knocked back a bit.
The Maya Codex talk about the time when the oceans rolled over the land.
There,
and
see?
Machu Picchu and Pumapunku. Well, Pumapunku is 16,000 feet in the air. How did water raise up over top of a mountain and inundate that place like the kind of damage that we're seeing now? That was a massive wall of water that caused this kind of devastation.
Well, this is why I have this question. You see, this is why when people say, oh no, it's just because of a release of an ice lake. Oh no, it's just because it melted real fast. No, I'm still of the opinion that once all the planets that were sitting there above the North Pole decided to leave, the sloshing was pretty intense. And the middle of the planet would have been sloshed bad. Like, number one, it would have been where the water was the lowest, right around the equator. So we could, where the Yonaguni Monument would have been exposed. So anything 30 plus or 30 minus of the equator would be quite possibly completely exposed to the, well, I guess
the sea level
to sea level would be that lower, yeah, like
50 feet lower, yeah.
And of course, at the poles, they seem to be higher. We found evidence of that from Norway and other places where the water was like much higher. So here's this thing scouring all of Canada and Siberia and stuff on the north.
We have
and
the fjords.
Well, that's what I mean, like stuff like that. So they,
yeah, people just have to take a look at a picture of the fjords and understand that the water level was way up there.
Well, actually, it's quite possible that the water level was nowhere near there. That's just the removal of land right there. It's gone now. It's just like it was there and it was removed and lofted skyward when, Saturn connected or something. I'm not going to judge that right now. It's just hard enough as it is. But the amount of water being held up, that's one thing. It could start pouring back down because of, it was no longer being vaporized anymore. So it would start flowing back down and raining everywhere. That's one thing. But I still think that it's sloshing water. Like it would just flow down from the poles, both poles, the north and south. And
well, you're talking about your 200 to 300 foot or mile mountain of water that was in the polar configuration.
That's just a vaporized mountain. Yeah, but I don't mean that in particular. What I'm really more concerned with is the actual water held up by the tides. Like the moon pulls a lot of water around, but Saturn, if it was even 10 times further away, would be so much water. And if there was another gas giant on top of that, plus Mars, plus Venus, plus whatever, the amount of water being held up would have been stupid. So when it's gone, it's going to rebalance. And in the middle of the planet, where it was the lowest, would have been hit the hardest. It would have rose the highest there. Because, it's just a matter of, sort of harmonics. You have two massive weights traveling, trying to balance, and they're going to meet at the equator because, probably not exactly on the equator, but close enough it would just keep, water would just keep going up and up and up and up and up and up, and then finally, and it starts going down again. And that it would do that several times probably, because it would slosh back to the poles and then would slosh back to the middle until it finally stopped. And that would be a lot of friction to make that stop.
I think the orientation of the planet was slightly different. There is a bulge
saying it can't be.
in the Pacific, and there is a bulge near Africa and the Atlantic, and they're opposite from each other. I watched a video yesterday about this, and that seems to me to be the ancient poles.
Well, no, that's probably just what's happening because of the fact that the water cannot go in one direction, so it sort of sloshes up against the continent.
Well, yeah, I understand that, but there's bulges in the landform, in the landmass underneath the sea. There's two large bulges at once, one small on the Africa side, and then one really large in the Pacific. Like there's bulges in our planet now in the South Pole and in the North Pole. There's a bulge on the planet now. There, these old bulges, I think, is where the poles used to be, where we used to spin on.
Oddly, we have a pole. We have a sort of. This is one of the things that sometimes makes us think the Earth might be kind of geodish, because we have a divot at the top, we have a bump at the bottom, But when you get right down to it, though, the Earth, if it was like a marble or a ping pong ball, it would feel smoother than that to our skin if we could hold it. It might as well be made of the silkiest glass, even Mount Everest we wouldn't even feel it with our thumb. So it's pretty flat, smooth I don't want to get any impressions there. The Earth is not flat.
You messed up.
Did it? No. Here it is. There'll be all these people coming at me now.
And they what you're saying too, that's a Velikovsky source that says
Ireland, I like that. Sorry.
That's American text.
Well, just
did the
above
wall of
that.
water came.
Sorry, Sean. Just above that, Kronos says this. It's very interesting that the Hindus claim that the cosmic mountain was 672,000 miles high.
What was? Oh. The cosmic mountain. That would.
In other words, the polar configuration, including all the way up to Saturn.
Yeah, that would have been that. So if you had a gas giant that close to us, which is only what 3 times the distance from here to the moon, that's a frack load of water. Like, I mean, think about it.
They were definitely sending us a message. You know, one thing that ancient people couldn't tell us with stones is that there's a flood coming. There would be no way for them to do that really, unless they carved a picture in stone, which we actually have. We do have, but ideally, what a stone enclosure is going to show us is that these people were responding to an ongoing threat, not a single cataclysmic event.
Well, this stuff, yes, this is like these people.
You might say cyclical. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was agreeing that these things are not. These are things are not necessarily like the flood thing is. It would be something that they already, like, by this point had already all died from. Yeah, right. The stuff that we're seeing, the stuff that they were hiding from after that would be just like, because remember before that, when things were in the golden age, things were not unbalanced, so they weren't necessarily worried about getting an electroshock therapy involuntarily from passing planets. But in this case, everything was like great, and they could have had a great society back then. But then that stuff happened. The survivors went, holy crap, and those that could find something did, of the past and tried to make use of it, it seems, but they still wanted to hide from, like, I mean, if thunderstorms were even 10 times worse than they are today, we would be much more concerned about them.
There were, sorry, Neil, there were 3 flooding events. Cool. Plato, when he went to Egypt, Solon, when he went to Egypt, he brought the tale of the flood to the Egyptians, and they went, there was 2 others. Then they proceeded to tell him about Atlantis, and we know that there was 2 other floods. We have that scientifically documented as pulse meltwater 1A, happened at 12,000 BC, 12,900 BC, same time as the wiping out of the megafauna, 120 megafauna species gone. And then 1,200 years later, pulse meltwater 1B, documented, and we know that these 2 events happened.
What was the distance between them? What years?
1,200 years. And the second event coincides with the burying of Göbekli Tepe. So, Michael?
Well, it references, did you say 1,200 years or 12,000 years?
1,200.
Okay, yeah. I was thinking about
the first number, 12,900 years ago, was when the scientists, mainstream scientists, say all the megafauna died off.
See, that there is not a flooding event. Right. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, they could have died off, but that indicates to me a change of electrical environment in the worst way. Like, that's when I think you would have had the explosions of the pyramids. And let me reason this through. The step voltage potential for large animals is very big. Like, it's bad for them. That's why we could stand, like a shepherd could be standing out in his field, and lightning could hit and kill a whole whack of animals near him, and he won't die.
Yeah, but water has to be involved as well, because we look at Randall Carlson's work.
I didn't say it wasn't.
See water.
I just said that there was electricity involved in this, so it could have changed the electrical environment. And what would have happened when if that's the same thing, we would have been inside of the coma of Saturn, and then we wouldn't have been. So yeah, that would have been a big change of electrical environment. So
yeah, and my point is this: I think we have plenty of evidence, obviously, making that point well, that there have been cataclysmic floods that occurred, and that there have been more than one of them is certainly true. What I'm suggesting is that the megalithic stone structures that we're looking at are not evidence, could not be considered evidence of said such one way. Yeah, and building a giant stone structure, not what you would do, or a small, tiny stone structure out of very rough hewn stones, not something that you would do to protect yourself from a flood. And so I think we have to look elsewhere for evidence of flood. Now, there's plenty of it, but not in stone structures we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that those were like that being wiped clean by God, so to speak, would be a scar enough for a whole civilization, the whole loss of the golden age. And of course, every time they saw another planet come by for the next little while, they'd be scared of their minds. It would take a while for them to adapt some sort of way of detecting or way of knowing when these things are coming by. And then in the meantime, save yourself from minor intermediate weather events that we would think of comparatively minor, but I bet you they didn't. Would be very disconcerting, especially if if you lived in certain areas.
I think they were surprised as hell when the waters came. We have the codex of the Maya saying that the water just swept over the entire continent.
Yeah,
and it obviously climbed up 1,600 feet up the mountains.
Why wouldn't it?
To Pumapunku.
What I was going to say, Richard, guys, is in the Velikovsky sources, the way it describes in the Mesoamerican text, the people couldn't see through the skies, and they were thinking and fearing the mother goddess was coming, but it wasn't the mother goddess, it was a wall of water that came out from the skies. So in the electrical events, yes, all weather events would be scaled up tremendously, considering you're being ripped away from your environment, if you will. Sure, yeah, they wouldn't, extreme weather patterns, even that we see today, would just be scaled up a lot higher. Hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis. Yeah, if the scale of the charges are what they are, then the associated weather with it is going to be scaled up the same way. So
yeah, it would be fire. It would be fire, water, and the earth opening up, expanding. It would be all of this. It would be these.
Well, even when Moses was being chased across the whole, Exodus thing going on there, okay? I mean, they called it a pillar of fire, okay, that was stopping Pharaoh's troops or whatever. Now, we wouldn't call it that. We would be freaking the hell out. Like, there would be us here on Earth. Like, we would not be like, holy God, because we don't see fire tornadoes. Okay. But they just stated it matter of factly. Like, yeah, and there was a fire tornado. Yeah. I mean, because that's what fire tornadoes do, right? I mean, everyone knows what fire tornadoes are. So that's the kind of ambivalence that happened in later was like, these guys are used to this by now. Like as things got less and less intense, things got easier to deal with. We weren't getting hit, the plant, we weren't have to worry about planets going by nearly as much, that type of thing. But if you check the screen, this is what I saw that I thought, not this part here. Now take a look at this and tell me if this is not a pretty good place to go and hide if you were, say, trying to run from a, sky that's on fire. So they look at the drawings on it. There's nice sculptures and stuff inside of it. This is, I think, Sardinia. And this is what, like, I saw this guy crawl into this thing, and it kind of blew my mind. Like this, by the way, look at the whole top of it's blown right off. So this was a shelter, and it's been destroyed. But there was another layer to it, and then you go in there, and then you go in here. Okay, with all of your goats and everything else and your family.
at those carvings.
See, I think that they're. I think that this is how you hid. This is a really good way to hide from getting killed here. And
Or
you have multiple layers. You see, you could put you can get the women and children all the way in the back room, and then you can keep on trying to put more and more people, into the places closer, like, because closer to the door. You wouldn't even need a door. Like, I mean, it's just
stone dolmens as well. Up in Russia and the northern latitudes, there's a lot of dolmens with small little holes in there, and people could jump in them if there was a big problem coming.
Well, yeah, that was my thoughts. Yeah, that was a really good idea.
It's also possible that these were smaller people.
Well, I'm not that we've had people. I mean, of all shapes and
I'm
sizes.
sure as hell it wouldn't fit in there. I'm just saying.
Oh, well, no, but we're also fairly large.
But if I was, I would if it were for my life, though, right? That's
I'd get in there. You'd bet I would. Yeah.
This is after 12,900 years ago, when everything changed, when the woolly mammoth changed into the elephant, and
this
the
is
giant
also
tiger
this place
changed
here,
into
by the way.
regular tiger, and so on and so forth, and we changed from the giants that we were. I think that we were what the Bible described as giants before Adam and Eve, and repopulate the earth, like the Bible says, is saying that there was something here before us. And
the idea of having giants, like, we got to understand that if there was a quote unquote, type of golden age type of idea behind this thing, and that there was a plenty, like constant sunlight and everything was growing on the northern hemisphere all the time, because of the light coming from Saturn. I mean, think about it. I mean, you just
less mass, less gravity as well.
Well, yeah, and so what are the restrictions to keep us from growing? I mean, we have a physical limitation basically on how much of our muscles and bones can move, but the other limitation is food, how much energy we can consume, because you need, like if I was a resting individual who just happened to be 12 feet tall or 16 feet tall, I would need, 22,000 calories a day just to walk around and breathe? Like, that's a sizable chunk of energy. It's not something it's like, yeah, every day I eat a cow. Like, that's...
Well, you see, there was a lot of stories that there was food.
This place got screwed over. Look at this blasted.
In the Purple Dawn.
Well, that's what I mean, because if you had a light, if you had light coming from the north all the time, lighting up the northern hemisphere, it would be constant food. Every tree blooming all the time.
Well, it would be not just the northern hemisphere.
You haven't seen these? Yeah, I know. It doesn't look crazy, blasted to pieces. People, like, it looks like just so many places to go and friggin' hide. Like, it's. I'm worried about fire, not flooding. Fire. Yeah. Like, this is where we lived. This is how it is done. And I don't think it's like, some of them, look at them. They're not that necessarily that big. Like, some of them were just like most people, like when they've expanded to a certain size, these were just used as shelters. Like,
small tribes and individuals.
Yeah, and they would literally run for the hills. Running for the hills probably meant exactly this. Yeah. The sky's falling, run for the hills.
Yeah. Now, these are the shelters built by a ragtag remnant of a former people. This is not high tech. This is survival.
Yeah.
This isn't culture. This is survival,
Well, and I think they expanded on that later. I think that they obviously still. I mean, this is after the big flood. Maybe amazingly, someone said, no, I was just there with my friends fishing outside of Sardinia, just like a usual people. Then the floods came over, and our boat survived, and we landed here. But look at this now. Here's the same island. This looks like it was technology pre getting the floods. You know what I mean? Look at that.
And now the problems are over with, and, well, there's this place that
But
we don't
even it
use
got hit.
anymore, and why don't we stick our dead in there and call them mausoleums?
Oh, I don't.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what they try to say that they were, and then they made some sort of weird. Yeah, see, look, they even have like air shafts, well made. Look at that stonework. That, I mean, if you're looking at my screen here, this is just wonderful. Blew my mind.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Well, this is the kind of stuff that I think about is this type of work. What were they building for? Why would you want to protect yourself?
Well, look at the outside of that stonework as the camera started to go down. Doesn't it look like it was etched away by some electrical force? Doesn't look like that was water that did that to me.
Well, and you're probably right. I mean, I think that these would be. I mean, if you thought about things being electrical etching, and right now we have a few lightning bolts an hour, in a storm or something, But if we were 10 times that number or 100 times that number, this is just. It would just be constant lightning going across an area. It would be akin to fire. And you would hide from it. Yeah. They were on an island too, so you'd have to.
Well, yeah, it would be the Lichtenberg pattern.
Well, no, I mean, as an island is the
highest.
An island is the highest point in the entire area because the water is flat, so it's going to attract hits from any storm that goes by.
Right. Yeah, but we know that the charge moved along the ground too, and this is what is responsible for like the Grand Canyon and the river systems that we now have. And water just flows to the low point, so it uses these carved out canyons and river systems to flow along now. But they were created by these electrical thunderbolts of the gods, the same snakes that cosmic snakes that people talked about, and cosmic dragons coming down to the earth. And these are the same thunderbolts that Zeus had in his hand, the red sprites. And we're not talking about 10 or 15 or 50 of them above a storm cloud. We're talking about the skies being filled with them and them coming down and just carving stuff up and depositing stuff in other places.
There's a foundational principle that keeps coming up here, and that is a thing happens, and then other people come along and take advantage of that thing, and then weather responds to that thing. I think a lot of the sort of geological evidence we have for electrical activity in our past has also been used for water, has also been used for people, has also been used for. So I think in order to bring people together and help people understand, I think it's important to talk about chronologically layers. I mean, that's sort of how
we definitely see
geology,
that.
right?
I remember there was a house that was built, and these people found a complete cavern system underneath their house. Like and the house was bought and sold for generations. No one knew it was there. But this is the thing. What would happen?
Not an uncommon story.
Well, and why wouldn't it be? It makes perfect sense. You have a bunker, that it's right there, and at the end of it, why would you not just put a room at the end of the tunnel, and now it's inside your house, and now you have access to a place to, because when you were less scared, you would build outside again. I mean, these people would probably, at the time, when you see these guys exploring this place, but these people would have been, let's say they were fishermen or whatever. So here they are, they're out doing their fishing thing. They see the storms coming. All right, everyone goes inside. They start getting all the animals together. They start getting everything out. They start going down to these tunnels. And they wait it out, and they see like breathing fire coming in the holes. And they're like, yep, glad we're in here and not out there. And they go out and they see everyone who didn't survive is burnt to a crisp. And then the land is blackened or whatever. And then they go out fishing again and go build new boats or whatever. But they have their animals and they have their lives. So win. You know what I mean? Like you said, this is survival.
Most definitely.
This is survival, not comfort. You build houses later at the ends of these things, yeah, of course, that makes perfect sense. You'd have a nice house because now you're not worried that you can build a house strong enough out of stone that it will last 100 or 200 or 300 years before something so strong enough to blow it down comes along again. But till you have to go back into the tunnel.
There may have been some houses that survived, but the people that own them didn't survive, and now it's your house.
Well, but yeah, that's what I mean. But it would be. I mean, a lot of these places were abandoned, after, they were like, okay, is any more stuff coming down from hell? Like, no, we're good. All right, we don't need these anymore. Some of these look like that, but others look like, well, maybe, and we're just going to sort of, build a house over top of it just in case type of feeling, But these are just speculation, of course, but it's the amount of them and the more work they put into it, and there's no bodies in them. These people weren't burying people except for themselves. And who wouldn't try to hide themselves underneath these things to protect from what might be coming. And you never know.
I always say the ancient people didn't do things the hard way,
right?
And it would have been the most logical way. Why would
and we saw the same thing in.
And they also did things through observation. If they've seen these storms coming and they saw that certain areas of the ground were untouched, they would go there and they would build their little tunnel systems, and you know what I mean? Because apparently that's good ground that wasn't interfered with in the last storm, and hopefully it doesn't get interfered with in the next one.
Pretty straightforward. I mean, it does make perfect sense. They're empiricists at the time. They lived through experience. The rationale of what it was may have been weird, but then the logical side would, yeah, guys, right there, like Neil just said, it's very systematic and logical to do it that way.
They did the same thing in Tent Rocks, believe it or not. I went to Tent Rocks and they had a few carved out dwellings where it was quite clear that people lived in them. And I'm just taking a look right here because I was here in Sedona, so and I think they're going to see the same place I saw last time when I was there. And their dwellings up in the rocks. Yeah, I think these are they. See the cuts, and then they put rocks on the inside of them to give themselves a facing. He's just blathering on. I just want to get some pictures of them. See?
Okay.
This is what they're looking at. Like, they go and park themselves underneath these cliffs, probably for the exact same reason.
Well, this isn't older than Chaco Canyon.
I don't know where this is exactly, but it's in Sedona. I've been to a few of these places. They have similar traits where they made some sort of clay slate wall in front, just as with doorways in it and stuff. And then the back wall is just the natural curve of the fire that ran through the cliffs and ate it out, so to speak.
Hey, Neil.
Yes.
Ben Winter says the dwarves of the old in their minds with dragons above.
Well, that's
Ben is a visual storyteller.
I thought about that too the first time I thought about it, and it really doesn't surprise me, especially when these stories would be told by survivors, and a lot of the most impressionable ones would have been young. If you know what I mean, they would have been telling, running through these caves. You could stay in them for a month probably or longer, depending on the circumstances. I've seen situations where it says that like they had places in Turkey that what it was 30 or 40,000 people could stay in there for years. That's a bunker system, that's a lot of planning. But this is the type of, and I love the rocks too, very pitted, just like electric wind coming by and ripping things off of them. I honestly didn't see this one. Anyway.
It makes sense to me.
Well, yeah.
It makes perfect sense.
I really miss these places.
Do you know the date of what we were just looking at in that canyon that you were at? Because Chaco Canyon people are from 800 to 1250 AD.
Really?
And I think that's the
Do you believe that?
oldest. Well, I think that's the oldest.
No, I mean, I have no
North
faith
American.
in them whatsoever, especially after talking to James. I mean, they're going to put, considering the politicized nature of the situation, they're never, I mean, the idea that, like in Canada, there's you notice a lot of things in Canada go back a lot further than they do in America, but they look very similar because we're not necessarily worried. We have treaties with the people. We're not necessarily worried. We don't have that sort of big fight of land suits going on where they're like, no, everything here is owned by us and type of thing. We have a little bit of that in BC, but not as much in other places. And with that, we don't have the, we have places where like these people are dated to be 12,000 years old or 9,600 years old, much older than conventional dating would seem from the.
Well, right, yeah. I know that. I know what you're getting at.
I just mean I don't trust it.
I understand. I'm not 100% on the dates that they give us either, but we do know that before the people came back into North America, after 12,800, 900 years ago, after the event, people repopulated into North America, and we're not sure. We know that we're starting to see dates in North America of 180,000 years for the Clovis culture. Scientists are starting to, in North America, accept dates of around 40 to 50,000 years now. Long before this land bridge was supposed to have disappeared.
Well, they wouldn't. I mean, it's the land bridge idea is kind of silly anyway. I mean, why would you go anywhere by foot when you could take a boat? The argument that these people didn't know how to use a log is ridiculous. I mean,
exactly.
Especially if there was an astral version of a boat in the skies in that whole Jason the Argonaut thing, according to Jim's work, that might have been sitting there for the last, 30,000 years or more.
There may have even been a culture that was existing on the seas.
Well, of course, that's the implication.
Yeah,
I mean, in fact, the Bimini road, the most logical explanation I saw was somebody had noticed that there was 3 big pillars that were up the shore a ways. Well, a lot of times what happens is when the jetties or docks break down, which this looks to be a giant dock, perhaps Roman even, or pre-Roman, then this dock, the water level rises above the dock. So they went and put 3 pillars, which is something you could tie the boat to still. They kept showing up in the same area long after this dock had gone underwater. So is that the situation? Because they would still tie themselves to it, and eventually they abandoned the whole place because obviously it got flooded or destroyed or something, whatever civilization was there at the time. And I see those type of arguments as very compelling. And if you look on the screen right now, you can see you can see some of these buildings I'm talking about. See how there's a big cut right underneath the layer of burnt stuff, the stuff that's protected, and then, like I said, they go and they dig under, and then just underneath that layer, more iron-rich rock. So it's good. It's a good way to have a shelter, I guess. Google God self-icon. Okay, I'm gonna try that. And I'm gonna Google a God self-icon. That's what Chronos says. I think he said Google. But I think he meant, oh, this guy. He must be this guy. Oh, he's talking about the symbols there. Yes. That's a pretty universal symbol, yeah. It's part of the squatter man, kind of. Part of the golden, what's it called there? The
Oh yeah, there he is.
showing the showing the lightning bolts on either side.
Waterman.
But this is the weird thing. This right here is very Saturnian. Like you have the whole pillar here. So this is the part where, and you can see how they're different. They're holding something on the sides of them. Perhaps maybe that's the way you could tell the difference between
the squatter man and the polar configuration.
Yes, because clearly they have similarities that are.
Well, they're both our Father who art in heaven.
Well,
Sorry.
no. I mean, one of them is older than the other. But what I meant is that the idea that there's, I mean, we've seen the idea of it being a cup. We've seen it in Wells Cathedral. The squatter man was there when we went at the Bath conference. A lot of us were like pointed up there, and the guy who was giving the talk didn't even see it, but we were like, squatter man, like it was just so.
Yeah, you're talking about in the shape of the arches
of the cathedral.
Once you see him, you never stop seeing him.
I know, it's very crazy.
Yeah. Once you understand, you understand.
So did you guys see my cool Squatterman robot sculpture?
Yes, I did. What is that made of anyway?
No, I didn't.
I posted it in a couple of the forums, but on Facebook. It started out with basically wood blocks. I'm working with a student and teaching him sculpture, and that was my example for him, and so it was really fun to make. But I was watching stuff about the cup and the chalice and the all that, and it was a bunch of different things. But I wanted to sort of do a Squatterman robot, so that's my squatter.
I want to know who Galahad was that he was sent after the cup. I keep on thinking that might be Mercury.
Well, the cup.
Like the golden chalice? Like the Holy Grail. The top of the squatter man.
Right. That's why the sculpture has a cup on the top.
Yeah.
That's sort of what I'm...
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I see too in a lot of these things. I mean, and obviously you've hit the nail on the head. There's clearly that fanning out that we've seen in that I've talked about, where we were talking about how the
dendritic elements.
Well, when I think about the galaxies, and there was a good argument there that Jim was saying that maybe, or I think it was Gareth, maybe Jim or Gareth. It was talking about the way that things were folding, that there may be that Alfvén suggested things may be folding in on themselves, and obviously I don't agree with that, because you need power to constrict the magnetic field. So it requires power input. But
oh yeah, I remember.
But suffice to say, the idea that they're strung along on strings is makes sense to me. But these strings might be really wide because they're constricted down because of the magnetic field of the galaxy. But I mean, they could be puffed right out, like to a much wider degree than we think of when we get to extragalactic, because there's nothing there to constrain them, like I've said. So you could have these. The reason I bring it up is because of that wide top of the Squatterman, chalice idea, that things really spread out. So if we were trying to think of the galaxy just being along the neck of one of these Squattermen things, and you're dealing with a really wide current,
I see.
And we're probably not visualizing it right, which is fine, because we're just beginning to wrap our heads around this anyway. But this is, when I see this, I mean, this is obviously, there's some activity these people were seeing. I mean, especially that, look at it, you got these very, I'd say it's very basic symbol of a square, man, a cross at least, with holding two animals it's fighting, wriggling around on either side, the Gilgamesh idea, with Saturn on top. Kind of hard to deny. Very well done. Thank you very much for pointing this out there, Kronos. Was it Kronos? I hope it was.
It was.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned Kronos' name earlier, so it must have been.
I just don't want to be not giving someone credit or accidentally being wrong. But
Kronos,
these are
Kronos. His stuff is amazing, by the way, folks. Go look at his YouTube site if you haven't looked at it already. It's just phenomenal.
He also said, I found that as the powering Cosmic Mountain became the waterman in between the two celestial rivers. So he's seeing it there too.
Oh, when I see these two animals on either side, as they of course are going to change form over time. Like one people define it as a lion, and it's lion for a twisting lion forever. It's a twisting snake. It's whatever it is. Two pillars that become snakes, you know, on either
some
side.
Some are stags or deer.
Well, yeah, but the point is, I mean, any coat of arms, you can see that flags of provinces and so forth. But,
well, it's called artistic license, so.
Well, it's also been repeated over and over and over, and it's a tail and a tail and a tail. Yeah.
Analogy.
Trying to understand what they're looking at, and I understand it's totally fine. But my first thoughts on that were sort of like that garland around the Christmas tree, and the reason I say that snake form, it would be the snake that tempted with the apple, I guess, in the whole Christian beginning there, you know, and then of course you'd have the fighting the dragon, or the Ragnarok, or that dragon that ate the roots of the tree type of thing. So there's clearly a motif. These would be basically like the outside cylinder. If you were to imagine that sometimes you could see 3 cylinders to a tornado. You know, you get the middle one you could see, and then you could see the outside ones. And sometimes, if you look really closely, you can sometimes see another one. It's kind of that feeling I get. If that makes any sense to you.
And again, we're seeing a central theme that's expressed in multiple different ways, from the very simplest and most rudimentary to very complex and with lots of creative license. But the theme continues.
Definitely. Well, yes, 2 celestial rivers flowing through the throne of God there, Kronos. Sometimes I always thought, when I see throne of God, sometimes I'm wondering because sometimes that big flaring out part reminds me of more of a Saturn or a sort of a Jupiter thing. And I wonder if maybe I'm looking at this wrong, but every time I do, I end up seeing the Saturn symbol above the head. So I'm like, well, no, it looks like it's part of the whole reason why Romans and Egyptians and natives all wore skirts, I guess, type thing.
Neil, do you have a hypothesis or a hunch or whatever about the little knobs that they find on these types of stone?
Thanks for bringing that up. Andy actually had an idea about this. We were at the symposium, and then Andy was looking at these knobs on some of these things, and one of the things he pointed out was that they were always seemed to be above the people's heads. Like they were just above their heads. I'm trying to find an example of that right off the top of my head, but I can't. But the idea though is that maybe, he said, if this is sort of like a Faraday cage they were using, like for example, a Juan de Tombo, it's not really a fortress. It was built to protect like a well or something. Oh. And so
a stone Faraday cage.
Yes. And
I
then
just had a light bulb going off above my head.
Well, yeah, and especially in some of these things, you would see the Faraday cage effect. We saw the same thing with the C-shaped antennae that Raymond was looking at, and he might have found in Kentucky there, where they sort of have a C-shaped antenna. well, if this is the thing, some of these points that are sticking out of the rock, if you were wanting to not die, for example, and you were walking out along the outside of the rock, well, if they're above your head and these things were attracting, like these happen to be the things that were sticking out, well, if you were walking near the wall, lightning would not hit below that level. They would always hit those jutting out pieces. Maybe that's what they were for, to protect people from, death. But I don't know, of course. I mean, these are just speculation. But going with the...
Well, and any stone enclosure would automatically have that effect.
If we were in
if you were inside a stone enclosure and you touched the stone during an experience like that, would there be an effect that you would experience?
I'd have to calculate it, because Faraday's cages are not perfect.
Yeah.
Right. Well, these bumps are on the outsides of walls where there's no opposite wall to...
Well, yes, because you'd want them to not hit people running to it if they were trying to get there. You're trying to protect them as much as you could.
Crawl along the wall to
get inside or whatever. Yeah. But they want it inside because it won't hit the inside. It's a Faraday cage. If it is all linked together with little pieces of metal, and you then, anytime you got hit, it would be a circle. You would be protected, assuming it would actually do that. These are just interesting effects that might have been occurring that Andy had pointed out. And he hasn't released papers about this or anything. We were just talking at the conference, so I don't want to put words in his mouth. But it was very compelling when we were, because obviously we've talked about this at great length before. Well, yeah, because why were they? Like we pointed out very clearly that the pieces of metal that link these things, they would be sheared right off if there was an actual earthquake. There's nothing that would stop the force if there's something was going to move one of the stones away from that wall. That little tiny piece of metal is not going to stop. It's only like 2 inches across at most. And not of high grade tensile iron or anything. This is just poured bronze or something, right? So it'd be sheared right off. So they were there for another reason, like to make the wall all one piece, all one electric circuit. You know what I mean? Making sure each piece is connected to the next piece. Yeah.
Circuit board.
Yeah. Well, I guess, yeah. Because, I mean, the idea that they were using stones in an energetic way seems to be almost the case, and it seemed to have something to do with vibration. We can't deny that.
Sorry, I don't mean to say circuit board. That's a wrong connotation.
I know what you meant.
More of a grounding wire.
Yeah, or something at least to maintain the electrical conductivity around the whole darn thing. Yeah, and obviously that whole Puma Punku idea, because that's where they do it too. Well, actually, they do it in several places around the world. Same idea, to keep these things all electrically one solid piece. Which maybe if it was something as simple as just making sure that it glowed evenly, like that could as simply as be as what they were doing, like, well, you see, if we didn't, you have to make sure that they were all connected. But now you go and build something, and the night comes where it's all beautiful and starts building. That one piece over there, that one part of the wall, doesn't friggin' glow. Wouldn't that piss you off? You'd have to rip down that whole wall and go and put the piece of metal in there to make sure that it glowed, to make sure it got the conductivity so it would continue glowing, so that it would look even. Because, I mean, imagine you're sitting there, the prince comes to visit, one part of your wall's not glowing. Someone's going to lose their head. Anyway, just thoughts that sort of pop into my frond.
Off with their heads.
Off with their heads. Hey, did Take Back Space arrive here?
I did. What's up, y'all?
Hey, how's it going, man?
Happy Soul Day, Sunday.
Yes.
Sorry, it's been busy here, so I just hopped on, catching up with everything. Hope everybody's doing well.
We're doing great. We were actually talking for about 2 hours now, so we're going to sort of wind it down. But I'm not ready just yet. I'm just happy that you showed up.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm listening in.
Cool.
Just having a sig. All right.
No, we were just
Welcome, Chris.
we were just talking about some ideas behind the cataclysms that might have affected and what they were building for. Like, why do you build this way? What environment were you trying to, like, what were you surviving? We saw lots of evidence of caves and places to hide. And obviously right now we're on to why are these knobs on the sides of the walls and so forth. So, but very interesting.
Great material. Yeah, great material.
And of course, what we all of us are like, okay, what part of the this is the Swaterman image in the whole under Saturn. What's going on here? We're very interested in that stuff because we keep seeing these symbols, and Kronos was pointed out that you could see them everywhere. He just said, go take a look here, and you can see a million of them. And well, that's what we've been checking out so far. So,
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It just seems like I'm bringing in thoughts of like inertial plane and the twisting Birkeland current, like coaxial circuit.
oh yeah,
we were talking about the throne of, right, the throne of God and the two sides of it and kind of the flowing rivers. So it just reminds me a lot of electromagnetic circuitry. And yeah, that's just my quick thought on it. Yeah, I'm just catching up here. There's so much great content this week. Everybody posted, and yeah.
Oh well, yeah. Actually, that's more me just catching up to everything that because of my trip. But I was glad to get it out, and it needed to get out. This is another thing that bothered me was these rut tracks. The fact that they look like they're actually like there's no animals that were pulling these vehicles around. What are these? What were these things for? Like I always enjoy the idea that there was ancient people that were driving around on cars. You know. I mean, clearly a lot of them too. Look at this. I mean, these guys were just four-wheeling.
I mean, maybe the thought is just the electricity was just so high and people could really, I guess the flux was visible, maybe, and people could really use electricity in different ways that we do now, where it's less visible or less powerful, or maybe they were
imagine if it was something like you know those bumper cars with the big wire sticking at the top to get the electricity from the top of the cage, you know, and that's what they were doing here. Just like I know that's silly, but I mean they had locomotion. Something was moving them through and fairly well because they're not getting stuck. You know,
Neil, it's absolutely plausible if we're talking about there being a time in the not so distant past that there was just enormous amounts of electricity jumping around in the sky all the time, and this was going on for a period of time, hundreds if not thousands of years, some degree or another, that the people who were living at that time might have developed a way to harness some of that energy that's floating around up there and experimented on giant rocks like this. You know, this looks to me like someone messing around with rocks.
Yeah.
I mean, it does. It's kind of willy-nilly. But if I had a giant tool that could form and cut and shape rocks, that was just pulling electricity out of the sky, I might go out somewhere and
play around
with it.
Well, I would agree with you generally, except that these are actually tracks because what the oddest part that I've pointed out before is that they have independent suspension. You can tell that some of them were like the axles were not live axles like you see in like old straight axle cars or anything like trucks. They like one wheel would go up and the other they would stay perfectly level. So whoever was either this is some sort of weird modern version that managed to freeze recently since 1900. You know, I don't know what to say. They're not pulled by anything. And you're right. So harnessing that kind of power, if there was a golden age and they had technology and enough time to do something, it's even possible that when I hear about things like the Black Knight satellite sitting up there, and it could be an ancient astronomer or ancient astronaut was lifted up and he's still there, and that, yeah, why wouldn't you try to get to another planet if you had the technology? Of course, it's quite possible that the first time they tried, they blew up too. So, because refining fuels doesn't seem to be the thing that they were into. They seem to be much more into harnessing what they got, which would make spaceflight, I think, pretty hard. But, you know,
Well, don't forget
thoughts
these
are in there, you
tracks
know.
are, yeah, these tracks are all over the world. Sorry, Neil.
Oh yeah, there's several places, not all over, but at least
Well, not
most of
I mean,
Asia, I
everywhere,
think,
but
has a little place.
yeah.
Sardinia, like we were pointing out there, there's little car tracks out there. Very interesting stuff.
Just 2 quick notes on that. I think I've done a lot of research on that Black Knight satellite, and
Okay.
the leading thought there is that it's a thermal blanket.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So, and then the
I
other
wasn't
part,
really like, you know, but
no, for a lot of years, I was like, oh my God, the Black Knight satellite. And then you really look into it, and it's a depth thing. You know, you don't realize how small it actually is in the window of the shot that it's being taken in.
oh yes, I fully agree on some of these things because, I've seen people make that same mistake, like that one where people see these rods flying around in videos and they think, oh my God, this is the craziest thing, we saw a UFO, and they don't realize that the way that electronic medium records things, it's just a bug moving, you know, and those are the wings flapping that you're seeing. And
right. The other thing I was going to say just about electric atmospheric events on like the surface of a planet. So I can imagine that on the moon you have artifacts like this, like maybe like electrostatic dust levitation, right?
Yeah.
And or like little plasma events that occur on the surface because essentially very low atmosphere, low gravity, different pockets of magnetism or charge on the surface of the moon, right? Different metals. And I would assume that if you walked around on the moon maybe today, you'd see what possibly primitive man saw on Earth. So like, you know, burning plasma balls that are just floating above the surface, or who knows, you know, or differently, or burning into the surface. Actually,
I think we clearly saw those as will-o-wisps way back when. Right. I'm a big fan of that one because of the idea that, because, you know, as someone who played like D&D and stuff, I was always fascinated by these odd things like silver kills werewolves and so forth. And it was like, how do you kill a will-o-wisp? Cold iron. And I thought that was very interesting because how would you short out across a plasmoid? Oh, yeah, just stick a piece of metal in it. Like stick a piece of cold iron in it with a magnetic field. It will shut that thing off, I'm sure. So they would, like, they see these balls coming at them, they would hit them with their swords or frying pans or whatever. Wood would have no effect. What a surprise. You know?
Totally.
So I see stuff like that. But
well, we call them ET now.
Yeah, I know. I mean, but I don't know if those. I mean, obviously, we don't know what they were, what they were actually doing. But yeah, going to the moon though. Speaking of the moon and some of the things they saw, I was interested in that Chinese find there. They found a goo or something. I think they probably found a techite, but because it looks like a piece of glass.
They described it as a gel.
Yeah, but did they poke it yet? And they only have one eye.
They drove up to it and they had a look at it and they put their spectrometers on it, and we haven't heard what the spectrometers came back with yet. Well,
no, but that's, I mean, if I walked up to something that it was, I wouldn't think it was a gel because gel would sort of imply liquidy.
That's what they described it as a gel-like substance.
Yeah, but if I saw a green techite on the moon that looked like a blob of green snot sitting there, because it was and it hit the ground, and you haven't touched it yet, I would think it would be wet until I touched it.
So it seems like they're referencing it in terms of like melted glass.
Well, that's
striking meteors on the surface, right? So
that's my thoughts.
It's the same kind of stuff. That's referenced, right? Like with the thunderbolts and like turning, transmogrification of elements, right? Alchemy.
Or just basically melted sand from lightning bolts. Yeah.
Well, we see that green glass in the Egyptian desert.
Right. Libyan glass, right? Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
It would seem like that as well. I mean, I was watching some moon stuff last night where they're talking about finding red spherules. And like how, we were so disappointed it was only red spherules. I'm like, that's very important.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I mean, iron-rich, basically transmogrified.
Yeah. nothing good here. We're just going to take this data, throw it away, and we're just like, you bastards.
You killed Moon Mission.
You bastards. Not interested at all. Yeah.
No, they were like, oh, well, I think it was, tell you what it was actually. It's Martin Mobberly channel posts the old Sky at Night videos with Sir Patrick Moore.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a recent one that they posted in 1994, Return to the Moon, when they launched the Clementine mission to the moon. And so they were talking about discovering new things on the moon. And it's a very interesting thing to watch a 94 contemporary piece on the moon and juxtapose it with where we are now after having received all the Clementine data, et cetera. And that's what they were talking about. They're like, well, we saw all this stuff on the moon, but, you know, not really interesting. And I'm like, no, it's the most interesting stuff. Stop. But yeah.
I can't even understand that sometimes. It's like, yeah, we just find all these little tiny Martian blueberries on the moon. That means nothing, though. Moving on.
Yeah,
like, it's like,
it was just. I'm like, but do you know what it was? No, it was just.
I also like that one where they saw the they found the center of the galaxy. It did 75 times brighter, and I thought that was really interesting because obviously it goes right in line with as Gareth's video there in See the Pattern. He was showing how Eric Lerner had calculated that it would take, you know, an order of several years, like God knows how many, but several, before the plasma at the center of the galaxy would build up enough charge to discharge again. And I guess it just discharged again. Which, of course, we should see it.
The Eric Lerner stuff is amazing.
Oh, yes.
Amazing. Well,
I mean, that whole plasma focus and then showing how the center of a galaxy works. I mean, it's just the simplest. It almost seems too simple sometimes. And this is where you get the jets. This is where you get these wonderful, blobs shooting out at almost light speed from this the middle of a galaxy, and you're like, how'd that happen? And they're like, oh yeah, that's just what black holes do now. Well, I thought they were supposed to create light. No, now they do something different. Now we've changed it. So what's your math say that makes that happen? Well, we're still working on that, but we're sure we're right. Okay, just keep on trucking there, buds.
Well, actually, that reminds me of something. I think maybe we're talking about the same thing, but it was about the periodicity of the quasar being around 3 to 5 years. Is this the same video that we're talking? Maybe I was just late last night, but
no. It was well, maybe maybe they were trying to describe it as two quasars hitting each other or something. I'm not sure what they might have been describing, but it was they saw a plasmoid brightened by 75 times.
Black holes trying to merge. I think it was.
Yes.
See the pattern. Yeah. Right. Exactly. And but it was just more about. Actually, he made a great point. Forgive me for not knowing See the Pattern's name, but
Gareth. It's okay.
Gareth. But he mentioned something that I always talk about, which is how long is light and Doppler shift the correct way to ration out distances in space.
Holtenarp.
Space.
Yes.
And I think that's such a great route to discuss, and it kind of really always ends up in a nebulous conversation, but really that's a key proponent. Like, how old are these things and how far are they? And is 5 years, are we seeing something from 3.5 billion years in the future, or is it happening right now? I think that's so fascinating.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm convinced that light can change speeds given different environments, because if the constants that we consider constants can be changed by electrical environment, then there's no reason to assume that light can't, considering we have seen it change. So
and gravity.
Well, obviously, in gravity, but and of course probably other things as well, including the rigidity and flexibility of certain substances, the strength of materials, et cetera, et cetera. This would all depend on the harmonics of its environment that it's in. So suddenly bronze could be 10 times stronger. Who knows? Now it's weak. Right. But we do know that if you heat it up, there should be certain things like I said, if you're heating up a piece of metal, we know that it will tend to get weaker over time. But certain weird things occur with certain other things. Like, for example, if you heat up, if you start freezing ice, for example, or freezing water, its densest at 4 and then begins to expand again, where it should be not doing that, but the structure changes and we get different harmonics. It's
well, during Hutchinson's effect experiments, he could, melt wrenches. He could raise bowling balls, make them fly up to the ceiling. All with sound, with equipment that he bought surplus from, the surplus store, the electronic surplus store.
I've seen a lot of his work, but I'm not sure I can verify it yet. Although, admittedly, I do have a gentleman who is also biting the bullet, just like you were there, Mike. He's like, bite the bullet, gotta do something. Well, because I feel lazy. Well, he was like, no more excuses. I told him he sent me the schematic, so I'm going over it now. But he's really trying to put forward a nice presentation for us regarding the broadcast power work that he did, that I saw at the symposium. And like I said, once you see it and you're like, okay, no, this is real, and I'm playing with it, I need to know more. Now, it seemed to be pretty low, and it seemed to be kind of capacitive because I could interfere with it with my hand, but still very interesting.
This is the cave I could live in.
Oh yeah. I like how they're finding such weird iron. Like, that was bothers me there.
Let me ask about sympathetic resonance, or talk about sympathetic resonance for a moment. And
sure.
Is it aligning field modality in rocks? Can you melt stuff like that? I mean, is that really what it's like? I went to Coral Castle too, and you move around those 2-ton coral stones, and you're like, wait, what's really happening here? Is it aligned with earth modalities, or does it have its own kind of lattice structure that's based on like hexagons or crystalline forms? You break the direction of these flows, and all of a sudden rocks could become liquid.
I'm not sure about that. There's some things that I'm skeptical about Lee's work, Ed Leeskin's work, only because of certain things I know of him. Number one, he's a mason who's an expert in concrete, who came from Russia, and the engine that he built,
flywheel.
Well, I've seen so many mysteries about it, of course, but the one gentleman that impressed me the most was a guy who basically just went ahead and built it, and and he built it, and we found it was just a simple DC motor, but the way that he built the north-south alignment of the things, and the way that he used moving switches, that's why some of those little things, they come on and they turn off, they come on and they turn off, and he was able to, by just using a few basic car batteries, which at the time he had access to, without any other source of power, he could get these things to just go duk, 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 and lift large stones, just 2 inches or an inch at a time, like just pulling it up. Now, for someone who had, especially at his age and with no other abilities, and as long as he hooked them up right, he could build some stuff. He would have power that you would not normally have access to, because he would have, he would just basically have to take the truck out and go driving, and all the batteries in the back of the truck would charge up as he, with the alternator, and then at night he used the power and continued on doing that. I thought that was a brilliant idea. Now, I can't say one way or the other it's true, but I found that, I mean, in a sense, considering when he did it, it's pretty too, magical.
I saw all that information as well, Neil, and that's how he carved the stone out of the bedrock with these machines that just carved down into the ground.
Well, and they were basically just multiplying his work, because they weren't what we would consider the types of machines we would use today. Like, we're used to high power. Look at those. Do you see those little links? Do you see them? Look at that.
Yep.
Sorry, right on
the one in the middle.
Yeah.
The middle column.
It's linked together. That's amazing.
Those are everywhere
like
around the
Japanese world. That's like the Japanese interlocking wood block things, right? Where they.
No, that's where they pour metal to link those together.
Right.
But this is what we were just talking about, so it was just odd that they popped on the screen. That's all.
I was just going to say one thing about Coral Castle. It seems like he basically built that little corner room where he lived
Hmm.
as like the main generator, as an exponential charge generator. So he created the flywheel up in the corner of the room, and then the rest of the area, I mean, the whole acre where it's on, is basically charged all the way through. I think it's still pretty, like, obviously, I think it's still very impressive, regardless of what he did. But yeah,
Well,
that whole
obviously.
place seems that whole place seems very charged and numerically accurate. Like, especially his whole kind of sitting on the throne, where it's a very interesting setup, I gotta say. A lot of alignments, a lot of like tools to basically set up for equinoxes and to watch Sirius. And
Well, he
then
was a Mason, and I don't mean I mean that's probably part of their tradition where they're. I mean, he basically built himself a little. Well, I wouldn't want to say Masonic shrine, but it's kind of like that. His own personal one, and he came and he had the technology that at the time would have been just very impressive. I mean, you're talking about around the 120 years ago or so, and this guy has basically built himself a motor of metal and concrete and a bunch of magnets that can go around and smack rock to pieces, and then with just simple things go and lift it around, because it would just go every time it went around in a circle, right? You know, and it would be almost impossible to stop. I mean, it would just basically moving the way that you would lift an engine today. You pull on that chain and you just keep pulling and pulling and pulling, and that thing's moving real slowly. Well, that's kind of how his stuff worked, in the sense that there was that much. It was an electric version of that, basically. So
I guess the last point about it is that he obviously scouted a whole bunch of places before he built it, right? And so you
that
run
would
the
have been
flywheel on top of a particularly high energy, maybe limestone or coral quarry, and you're going to get residual amplified magnetism, or pseudo anti-gravity. Like, I think
that
definitely the guy
scares me
who
that he might have been able to do that, because I don't. I mean, that's a bit beyond my bailiwick. But yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah, apparently he studied it for a few years before he even did one building, and then the other one is I saw the guy who built the flywheel, and the idea of like the uh, doing a certain number of coils, and some and basically alternating positive negative as the wheel goes around. That's something that's recursive through a lot of videos I've looked at, with people kind of building like the different flywheels and systems like that. Rodin coils.
That's how electricity works. Yeah, yeah.
No, but it's pretty. Yeah, I guess it's just the one man show version of it, which is very interesting.
Well,
And
yes, but I'm impressed with what they could do. I've seen a lot of motors that were just. I'm like, at the end of the day, like, I'm like, that's very impressive. You've pulled that together very nicely. I don't usually see that, and you're doing it from. I mean, if you watch all the variations of motors that we've come up with, and these people weren't working with the same goals in mind. It's clear that, as far as we can tell, I mean, besides those vehicle tracks, motorizing things or using, and besides drills, drills and the saws of ancient Egypt, a lot of this stuff doesn't look like they actually had a whole heck of a lot of machining. I mean, some of it looks like it's, really well done, but could still be done by hand. And there's other places which you, of course, with Chris Dunn's work, you see the statues and stuff, and you go, nope, that was made by a machine. Why? Because it was. Take a look. It's they're too perfect. You can't do that. You can't. Mankind is not made to move their arm like that.
Actually, I don't know if you guys. Sorry if I'm.
You're not. We're just at the end anyway, but we've got a few more minutes.
So shut me up. But have you ever seen the Ancient Architects channel?
Oh yes, of course.
And yeah, so he was talking, like he did a great video
ridges and scoops.
Exactly. But I love the the sonic levitation videos, and then potentially like the pumapunku, and the stones that look laser cut are actually done with bags of concrete that solidified and squashed together. There's so many great ideas. I never even considered something like that when I saw those interlocking stones. I was like, oh no, they're cutting these out with lasers. And then, it's possible that they did them with a certain type of wet concrete that solidified. Could have been done with like dishes that, like Fresnel lenses that actually attenuated light from the sun, and they actually created laser cutting machines. There's so many different ideas that could really be plausible. So anyway, that's just a thought.
No.
What is it he says? We find it provocative or something like that.
We find it provocative.
He has a little saying that he says whenever he makes a really poignant, like a final thesis. He has a little saying like that. His stuff is really good. He's actually a proponent of. I can't think of his name. I'm sorry, but it's the Ancient Universe 2 is what he's doing on YouTube now. He's actually a proponent of electric universe theory and has brought it up and mentioned it several times.
Oh, totally.
Recently, actually. He's also associated with the Zohar Gate people or whatever they are, I think, or one of those other kind of more spiritually oriented groups.
Well,
he's an English guy.
I've been trying to push him into the electric universe for years.
Aha!
Ever since I started watching his stuff like 12 years ago.
Inside, gentlemen.
So I've been commenting like, go look at the electric universe, go look at symbols of an alien sky and thunderbolts of the gods and remembering the end of the world, and that'll give you the symbology, the information about all the symbology that's worldwide, everywhere, in every culture and every religion. And then you'll start to understand that this universe is electric and so on and so forth. I do that on Rex's show. I do that on, I'm subscribed to 252 channels. I do that on a lot of this stuff, on a lot of these sites.
You should put down the crack pipe then.
Can't do it. Wouldn't be prudent.
Wouldn't be prudent.
Read my lips.
But do you see? It's. I'm glad he like when I just looking at the ancient architects because you mentioned it there, and this is when I saw the stone balls of Costa Rica. This is one of those things. If you look at my proposal, my thing, these are just Z pinch remnants. That's why they're everywhere. The odd thing is that they're in. Yeah, those are Martian blueberries. Those are planets, basically. Yeah. The same way the planets are made. But I like how you can see that the inside of them is different. They've been cooked on the outside. I love that. And a lot of them are hollow. And some of them aren't round either. Like, they're not perfect. Like, they're layered. They were layered. Sometimes I believe that they carved the faces into some of these things because they were considered holy. So they put faces on them and stuff like that. I would have no doubt.
So Neil, what action would create a small comparative to a large size blueberry? What's the amount of energy? How do you attribute the size variance?
Current.
Just current.
Just current.
Well, these thunderbolts of the gods came down and scoured the land and left these balls everywhere.
Well, but his question is a very specific one. Basically, Ampere's law indicates that if you put more current, you're going to be able to increase the strength of the magnetic field. And these are basically inside. If you saw the plasmoids that would have occurred, that's basically what a pinch would occur in the middle of one of those. Pulling material in and squeezing it together. That is what happens. Sometimes a bunch of them get shot out like a shotgun from a hit, right? And they're all pulled up into this thing and they're pulled in little spheres. And then as they're falling, they get wrapped up in more and crushed again and crushed together even after that. That's what some of these things look like back here. And I think that's what the Earth is. The Earth looks like it's been crushed together, like by a multiple. That's why all the fault lines are. If you see what I mean, like.
And what do you need to make these Z pinches, these small little Z pinches, these small little globes on our Earth? You need a Birkeland current.
No, well, that's clear. I wasn't arguing that, but what I meant was.
No, I'm just saying that these are on all scales. We see them in the cosmos. We see them coming from the sun, feeding energy to the Earth. We see them creating the Earth. We see them creating these little balls. We see them creating little spherules in a certain experiment that we know, sapphire has changed all the probe from crystalline structure to spheral.
Not to be like, just repeat myself, but these blueberries being on the moon, on Earth, on Mars, and these huge balls. I mean, some of this evidence is just so stark and simple, and like hexagonal craters. I've been on that for a while, and I'm just like, man, it seems too stupid even to say, but that's it. I mean, it's there.
Well, when we found moon, or some of these, we found moons with equatorial ridges of that look exactly like what would happen when they're not finished. You also see, now we've seen a comet and a Ultima Thule there, which look like barbells of techites that have not formed completely. Pan, another perfect example of an unfinished Z-pinch. So this is why we're seeing them, because the planets are just like every other rock. They either get finished or not finished in the Z-pinch, and they go and as soon as they are, I mean, if it's, let's say it's half done, and I mean, we're talking a very quick process. So let's say it's half done and the current drops. Well, if it drops, suddenly the magnetic constriction drops, and now you're going to have an odd looking shaped ball. It's not going to be perfectly round. It's going to have ridges.
See Bennu and 67P, like the double lobed shape, and then the kind of more diamond shape that you see, that's everywhere. I mean, it's pervasive. Like, I don't know, like I'll do the moon thing with you guys one day and I'll show you like what I've noticed. But if you look at even Mari's like Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility, basically looks like a hexagon against a pentagon in a double lobe emergence. At the largest scales on the moon and at the smallest scales, you have these very recursive patterns that we see in individual elements, like, you know, asteroids and comets, but also carved right into the surface. Exactly. I mean, honestly, Sea of Serenity and Sea of Tranquility look like the bottom left version of that. What are you looking at, 67P?
Yeah, this is 67P. I'm just looking at. I can't believe they thought this is supposed to be like ice. Snowball. I mean, look at this. It's just a rock. You couldn't get more rock-like if you tried.
Yeah, and it's being electrically eroded at its equator because it's a rock, not metal. Like most asteroids are mostly metal in content, and they would behave differently. Bennu is probably more metal than it is rock, but it still looks like rock until it comes into the atmosphere and melts its surface to look like what we see as an asteroid meteor coming in. And most meteors have a high metal content and they melt instead of explode.
Well, the ones that we're going to find will, because we went over this in my little presentation there. Basically, anything resistive is going to be ripped to little tiny pieces, but metal objects might have just pits ripped out of them, which is exactly what we see in some of these metallic meteorites. They just look like see if I can find one, iron-rich meteorite.
Well, what I'm saying is comets are silica and asteroids are metallic more than the silica of an asteroid, and they erode differently, but we still
There's one on Mars.
Yeah,
wow.
We still
look at
see
all the blueberry dust in the background.
You know what's very funny? Sorry, it just reminded me of gallium. You know, melting in your hand. You know.
Yes, yes. Like you take a gallium nail and trick everyone to think that's really hot out. Yeah. You haven't done that? Okay.
Please. I interrupted Rick. I think I'm so sorry. I just
Rick.
thought of gallium. I want to.
Or don't. It's okay, Rick. Gonna sulk? Are you sulking?
No,
I'm just kidding.
I forgot to click on the microphone thing to unmute myself. So no, I forgot what I was gonna say, but that's okay. It's all right. Carry on.
Well, actually, no. We're fine, guys. This has been 2.5 hours. We got it working well. I'm gonna see now if I can actually play the outro on this. Because I set up, you're gonna like this. Well, it should work better. Let's see if this works. But anyway, guys, I had a great time, and everyone
Yeah, this
listening,
was very
thank you
fun.
so
Thank you.
much. We're going to try to do this more often now. We're going to try to turn this into sort of like the way the show works, because when we're done, the show will just be like just there. We don't have to edit it or anything.
To hang out with the smart dude.
Oh yes, that's what we are. We're just above monkeys playing with our own feces, okay? So let me go.
Neil, you're on fire today.
And on that note.
And on that note, all right, guys. All right, and no one talk. All right, we're going to see if this actually works. Okay. Well, I mean, someone's going to talk, but let's see what happens. Let's see if I can just make this flow. Oh yeah, look and see the transition's coming in. Oh my God.